Welcome back, everyone, to the Integral Conference, the Integral European Conference this morning. So in this workshop with Vivian Dittmar, we're going to look at the inner GPS, the transrational thought in practice. So it is my great pleasure to reintroduce to you, for those who have already seen Vivian yesterday in the keynote, Vivian, who is a passionate explorer of consciousness and culture from a very young age. She was born in Germany, but grew up in Europe, Asia, and North America. She founded the nonprofit Be the Change Foundation, and as a result, the Terra Institute. As the author of Power of Feelings and 6 other books, she has become a sought-after expert and keynote speaker on the subject of emotional intelligence. Her latest book, Your Inner GPS, explores the subject of transrational thought, which is what we're going to experience today with Vivian, and we have the privilege of spending an hour and a half with her in an interactive session. So about this session, a growing number of people have already begun to navigate their lives using transrational cognitive processes, often without being fully aware of what they are and how they work. Vivian has identified 4 distinct different disciplines of transrational thought: inspiration, intuition, intention, and the heart intelligence. Together with the 5th discipline of thought, our rational mind, they form our inner GPS. In this workshop, Vivian maps out the characteristics and interplay of these 5 disciplines and provides us with a deepened understanding of each cognitive faculty, and is inviting us on an experiential journey to explore them through guided meditation. So welcome, Vivian. I am Miriam, the host for this session, and I'd like to also introduce to you David from the US, who got up very early this morning to take care of the technical magic for this session. If you have any technical issues, please drop a private chat message to David, and he'll be able to help you. And for questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll be looking at it and providing Vivian with your questions that we'll be able to address throughout the workshop. And with this, Vivian, the stage is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Miriam. Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to have this time together and to share about the inner GPS and about transrational thought. We are at a moment in time when transrational thought is more important than ever before. The world is in such a state of uncertainty and such an openness, and a lot of people also experience this personally, professionally, and we find that the ways that we've been taught to navigate our lives, to make decisions, which often is rationally, doesn't work anymore. So increasingly, we find ourselves at a loss as to how to navigate these times. And this is where I find that the transrational disciplines of thought, as I call them, your intuition, your heart intelligence, your inspiration, your intention, together with your rational mind, are exactly what we need to be able to know in each moment, okay, what's mine to do now? What is mine to be now? What is the next step? So in this workshop, I'm going to take you through the entire inner GPS, and the intention is very much for this to be an experiential journey. So what this means for you is the more you can just let go of everything else, become fully present, and really engage with the guided meditations and also the sharings that we're going to have in breakout sessions, the more you're going to get out of this workshop. Because it's much more than the words that I'm saying. It's really a kind of transmission that is happening. And it requires your full presence. So I just want to invite all of us to take a moment to let go of anything else that we might still be busy with, turn off the cell phones, close any windows we might still have open, mentally and on the computer, and just take a deep breath, close your eyes or lower your gaze for a moment, feel your body. Notice your breath moving in and out. nourishing every cell in your body. And with another deep breath, just acknowledging how amazing it is to have a body, to breathe, and to be here right now. Great, thank you. So I want to start out with one of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein. Einstein said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." So this workshop is all about remembering the gift and also showing the rational mind how it can be a faithful servant to the entirety of our being. So before we jump into the inner GPS, I want to give you a little bit of context, and I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of thought, talking about how thought has evolved from pre-rational through rational to transrational. So let's begin with pre-rational thought, and that, especially in Europe, was before the era of Enlightenment. And there, you know, people lived in a world of belief and superstition and dogmas and holy scriptures, and basically taking other people's word for, you know, what is true, how the world works, and not having any way of verifying that. And this often led to a kind of pseudo-logic. And the pseudo-logic, I want to explain with an example from my own childhood, where I was blessed to spend years in a small village in Bali, way before all the tourists came. And I remember that it was very much a pre-rational culture, with all the magic and beauty of that pre-rational world, which of course for me as a 4-year-old, it was just my world, because 4-year-olds live in a magical world. And the kind of pseudo-logic that's pre-rational is, for example, if someone in the village would fall ill, the explanation would be that someone else put a curse on them. This is why you fall ill. And that's a pseudo-logic. So you have a cause and effect, but it wouldn't hold up to scientific scrutiny, that kind of cause and effect thinking. But it gives us the illusion of understanding what's happening. And that's pre-rational thought. And we still have a lot of that around today, especially now in the corona crisis. We notice a lot of people falling back into pre-rational thought. I don't know if it's happened to you, but I know a lot of people call me up and they say, I don't know what to do. My friends are driving me crazy. They're coming up with these crazy theories of what's happening. And it's that very simple explanation of like, this is why this is happening. And then it doesn't really matter what the explanation is, but it's this kind of linear pseudo-logic that just gives us this comfort of, okay, we know what's going on. And then, of course, came in Europe the Age of Enlightenment. And then, of course, that had a huge effect in all over the world, because the European culture has basically colonized the world. And there came the evolution of rational thought, which was a huge discovery. I mean, that we can actually verify things with empirical evidence. And there came scientific thinking. And there came a linear logic that was based on empirical evidence. So there, if someone falls ill, now we say, oh, it's because they got a virus, you know, and we can look at it, we can test it, we can verify it's there, and this is why the person became sick. So it's also a very simple cause and effect kind of logic. And of course, this type of rational thought is what most of us are really have been educated in, trained in. Our whole educational system is founded on rational thought, or at least aims to be. And for a lot of the world, this is how it works. Like, this is kind of the consensus reality, that this is what's real. Yet a growing number of people have realized that that's not the whole story. We cannot explain everything rationally. And when we realize that, and this often happens in times of crisis, when we go into really dark places in our lives or into really incredibly beautiful places like falling in love, something happens where something in us knows beyond words that that's not the whole story. And that there are dimensions to life, to the experience of life, that we cannot explain rationally, and we will never be able to explain rationally. And that's when we begin to open to the transrational realm of thought. Now, the transrational realm of thought initially is often confused with the pre-rational, because the rational mind, just anything that's not rational, it dismisses as pre-rational. So let's take a look at how transrational thought is actually different than rational or pre-rational thought. First of all, transrational thought reveals itself through direct experience, often through practice, for example, through a meditative practice. Through meditation, many people experience states of consciousness where they suddenly know that life is permeated by an intelligence, that life is sacred. Whatever words you want to put to it, they're never going to do it justice. So I'm just trying to give it words. Try to connect it to your own experience. These experiences are transpersonal. So yes, you personally experience them, but there's like a non-personal experience about them. They're also non-verbal, and they have some other characteristics which I'm going to look at more deeply in a moment. But at this moment, I want to focus on the aspect of logic. So remember, in pre-rational, we had the pseudo-logic. So you fall ill because someone put a curse on you. And then in the rational, we have the scientific logic. You fall ill because you contracted a virus. In the transrational, we have a non-linear logic. And of course, this is where the rational mind says, yeah, right, non-linear logic. Come on, you know, that's not logic. But it is. So what is non-linear logic? Non-linear logic knows that whatever happens, it is multidimensional and multi-causal. So we cannot say that there's a single cause for COVID-19. Yeah, we can maybe rationally say, okay, there's a virus and this is why people fall ill. But from a transrational perspective, it is multi-causal and multidimensional. And there's so many factors that come together to bring about something like COVID-19. And let's take it to a more personal place. Many people, when they have gone through a crisis, when they have experienced maybe grave illness, often it takes a while, but often they will look back and say, you know, this is why it happened. I had to become so sick so that I would finally leave that relationship or finally quit that job. Now, of course, the moment you put it into words, it's kind of very close to that pseudo-logic thing, you know? Because again, you're putting it into a single linear causality, and that's not true. Because yes, there might have been a virus. Yes, there may have been biographical reasons. Yes, like so many factors coming together as to why you fall ill from a virus and the next person doesn't. And it is only from a transrational perspective that these things begin to make sense. And this is why the transrational perspective is so important in times of crisis. So let's look a little bit more deeply into how we recognize transrational thoughts. So as I mentioned, they're non-linear. So not only does it mean that they're multidimensional, they have a multi-causal kind of logic, but non-linear also means that they tend to just pop up out of nowhere. And this means you could be like, you know, doing the dishes, taking a shower, and suddenly there's this thought that appears in your head seemingly out of nowhere. And you know, this is it. That's the answer you've been looking for. Maybe yesterday you were in a meeting with your team and you were trying and you're trying to get it, and it didn't come. And then suddenly out of nowhere it comes. So that's non-linear. And that's really hard for the rational mind, because the rational mind loves linearity, wants to know, okay, how did you come up with that thought? Why do you think it's true? Can you prove it? You know, what's your reasoning behind it? And transrational thought doesn't have that. It just comes. And this is really, really freaking the rational mind out. So now we come to the second hallmark of transrational thought, which is that it's elusive to reason. So the mind tries to figure out, okay, you know, the intuition says yes or no to something, and the mind says, yeah, but why are you saying that, you know? And the intuition just doesn't give a reason. And we'll look more closely at that later when we talk about intuition. The third is that transrational thought is non-verbal or abstract. So it doesn't initially appear in the form of words or any other form that we can grasp. It appears as a kind of gestalt. And then it's like a second step where the rational mind helps us to translate and put into words what we've received. So for example, when I first received the model of the inner GPS, it was just a gestalt. And then it was a process to put into words and to, you know, fill a whole book with it. And then when people read those words, actually that's supposed to be like a bridge for them to connect to the gestalt. Yeah. And of course, that's another hallmark that the rational mind really does not appreciate. So the fourth hallmark that really helps us to recognize transrational thought is that transrational thought is simple, subtle, and polite. Now, this is very important because oftentimes immature parts of our personality or emotional parts will pretend to be an intuition, for example. And especially in the beginning, when we're just in the process of developing our access to transrational thought, this can really throw us off. So when an immature part of our personality does that, they will often comment in a way that's very dramatic and full of fear and say like, if you don't, you know, take this journey now and visit this person, then you're going to miss out on the opportunity of your life. A lot of drama, you know, a lot of importance. That's not your intuition speaking, okay? That's old emotions, immature parts of your personality that want to seem important. So that's why it's important to remember that transrational thought, by their nature, are simple, subtle, and polite. And often they're so subtle and so simple that we just ignore them. And I actually like to compare it to, you know, imagine you're in a train station and it's super noisy and there's all the announcement and the trains in and out before lockdown, of course, and lots of people, and it's just so noisy and you're trying to hear a whisper. Now that whisper is your transrational thought, okay? And it takes training. And of course, all the noise, that's your mind and your emotions and their usual activity. So that's why one of the keys to really cultivating access to transrational thought is to cultivate inner spaces of stillness, to have maybe a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice, to even have a space where you can hear that whisper. So good thing, the fifth hallmark of transrational thoughts is that they're persistent. So you can ignore them for a while and they're not going to go away. You know, they're polite, so they're not going to like shake you and say you have to do this. That's not their nature. But you know, you can just ignore them and maybe check the next day, is it still there? And if it's a true transrational thought, it's still going to be there. And the sixth and final hallmark I want to talk about is that of being transpersonal. Now, transpersonal is something that if you've never experienced, it's really hard to wrap your head around it. People who have experienced it are often very happy if I actually finally name it. So let me give an example. Many people will experience when they develop their intuition and they develop like a deeper access to their intuition, they will experience places of will that are transpersonal. And what that means is they experience something in them wanting something, and they cannot say it's me. They cannot say, I want to go to Hungary to attend the IEC. It's not what I personally want to do. I would rather go on a beach somewhere. Okay, me personally. But then there's this something that says, no, Hungary. And that's a transpersonal will. So it's like a greater will emerging through us. And it's very powerful when we learn to access that level of will, that transpersonal quality of will, and learn to work in alignment with it. So if you've experienced this kind of thing, great, you can just take a mental note of it. Vivian Dittmar calls it transpersonal will. And if you haven't, you know, just stay open to the possibility of experiencing that. And later, as we go through the GPS, which we will do in a moment, I'll also tell you a little bit more about how you can develop your access to that level of will in yourself. Good. So this sums up the how to recognize transrational thoughts. And it can really help your mind, your rational mind, to recognize transrational thought. And it can help you to train your rational mind to not dismiss transrational thought prematurely, and to check transrational thought also. Yeah, so as to not to confuse it with emotions or, you know, more immature parts of your personality that like to be important or go into drama. And it's a really good list to just kind of even memorize, or, you know, maybe have a little note. You'll of course receive the PDF of the presentation, so you'll have access to it. And then you can, you know, when you have a thought content that seems odd, you can just kind of check it, you know, whether this is a transrational thought, and maybe you want to pay more attention to it because of that. And you can teach your rational mind to not dismiss transrational thoughts because they're, you know, nonlinear and elusive to reason and nonverbal and all these things, because now you know that this is actually the characteristic of a transrational thought. Okay, great. So after this little preamble, let's go into the inner GPS. The inner GPS, like I mentioned, is my map for the 5 disciplines of thought: inspiration, intuition, heart intelligence, intention, and the rational mind, and how they work together. In my experience, many people have begun to develop these transrational disciplines, and of course also the rational mind, and have also begun to explore how they could work together. Yet often there is a lack of distinction between these different disciplines, which leads to a lot of confusion. In my experience, the inner GPS needs all 5 disciplines to work well. If we have only one discipline or 2 or 3, then the whole thing becomes kind of lopsided, because they actually correct each other. And only when we really have them working together does the inner GPS function in a way that actually gets us to where we need to be going. Yeah. Good, so let's jump in with the first discipline I want to talk about, which is inspiration. And inspiration is the discipline of thought that comes from above. And you see I have a little light bulb there, because in a cartoon, actually the moment someone has an insight, which I attribute to inspiration, there will be this little light bulb right next to their head. And then you know, they've just had an insight. And energetically, this is actually what happens. When someone has a true inspiration, you can sometimes even see their head light up, or people will often touch their forehead, you know, or the temple is like, oh, I got it, you know. Now, in a moment, we're going to go into a little guided meditation where you can open to your own inspiration, and I can guide you to that place in your system. Before that, I want to talk a little bit about how, what science has found out about inspiration, which is actually quite interesting. So this comes from the field of research about creativity. And there's been a lot of research around this in the field of neuroscience recently, because people have realized that creativity is elusive to reason. So they're trying to somehow, you know, with the means of reason, with the means of science, to figure out what's actually going on when people are super creative. And what they found out is that people tend to be most creative and have the most creative insights when they first really go into a problem or a question. And this can be by themselves or in a team, and they really go into it and think about it and you know, really try to get it, really grapple with it. And then the ideal thing to do is to let it rest, to let it go. Yeah, when you realize like this, you've moved it a certain part of the way, and then you're not making progress. You know, it's that point when you notice you're stuck or you're starting to kind of run in circles. Let it sit and do something else. Ideally, some light task that doesn't cause your mind to go into something else deeply, but stop thinking about it. And what happens when you do that, and this was really fascinating when I first learned this, for me it was really fascinating. They found out that when you do that, parts of your brain suddenly start to work, and large areas of your brain suddenly become super active, that are only active when you do exactly this. Okay? And nobody knows what they do, these parts of your brain. And you're seemingly, you know, peeling potatoes, taking a walk, doing something simple. But your brain is doing something that we don't yet understand. And what they have found is that the more this activity is pronounced in the brain, the more creative is the person. So this will often lead to these spontaneous insights where people, you know, under the shower or whatever, will suddenly have this heureka moment or like, okay, this is it. That's the answer that we've been looking for. So this is something that you can really take with you when it comes to problem solving or, you know, mulling over questions. Take a while to work on them and then let them rest and open yourself to being receptive to the insight, the information, to reveal itself to you, and know that there's large areas of your brain that are really actively working on it, even though you're not aware of it. So let's take a moment to experientially go into inspiration. For this, please close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever is comfortable for you. Take a deep breath. Take a moment again to feel your body. Let go of anything that you might still have on your mind, any questions maybe that came up through what I said. We'll have room for questions later. Right now, just sense your body, feel your body. And then bring your awareness to the top of your head. And take a moment to just become really aware of the top of your head and notice how it feels. And then as you're aware of the top of your head, your next in-breath will be directed through the top of your head. And your mind doesn't need to understand how this works. Just pretend you know how it works and see how it's happening. And as your breath begins to flow through the top of your head, notice how your head expands. Kind of like a balloon. Allow your head space to widen and to open upwards. And as your headspace widens and the top of your head becomes increasingly permeable, notice how there is a new receptivity, a new openness. And it is this space that you can consciously access when you want to be particularly receptive to inspiration. And take another deep breath, again allowing it to move through the top of your head, pretending you know how to do that. And as you're still in this space of expansion and receptivity, allow your body or your hands to come up with a gesture that naturally captures this state for you. Find a gesture, find your own gesture. And then when you have found the gesture, take another deep breath and really feel this inner space and this gesture that you're making, allowing it to become an anchor in your system. So this one will enable you to more easily come back to this space anytime you want to or need to. Good, and then you can let go of the gesture when you're ready and come back with your awareness to the entirety of your body. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze. Okay, so let's have like 5-minute breakout sessions. Just to have a quick sharing about what you experienced in the meditation and to hear from 1 or 2 other people what their experience was, and then we can come back and maybe take 1 or 2 questions about inspiration.
Welcome back. We're waiting for others to be here.
So for those of you who are already back, while we're waiting for the other people to come back, feel free to share a little bit in the chat about what was your experience during this little guided meditation into the space of inspiration. And I'm really interested in your experience, not so much what your mind has to say about it. Yeah, and of course, if there's any questions that have come up out of your experience regarding inspiration, I'll be very happy to address those.
So what is coming up is this light, light, light with tons of emotion. Feels like now I have a huge helmet. Feels like the part of me that's struggling is no longer there. So much space, plugged in. Colorful and easy, memorable, profound experience. I'm very happy to visualize a space on the top of my head where I can tap into when I need inspiration. Feels like opening has been there since ever. Talking about thinking without just having the rational mind online is very powerful. Words come without asking. Experience a strong connection from head to heart. Open space, light, surprisingly easy.
Good. So thank you so much for your sharings. I'm really happy to hear and read what you experienced. And this is really the key to transrational thought, is that it's experiential and it reveals itself through sensing. So you might find in the course of this talk, your rational mind trying to understand what's happening, maybe also comparing what I'm saying with other concepts. And we've had a couple of questions in that direction, you know, how does this relate to this and that? I'm consciously not taking those questions because right now I don't want to give food to your mind. You can entertain your mind later on and try to work all that out if you have fun doing that. And here the focus is really on the experience. Good. So I'm really, really glad. And we're going to continue with other types of transrational thought. And in the course of that, we will have the experience of how different disciplines of thought appear in different parts of our body. So I also like to call it full body thinking or whole body thinking. So let's just have a brief summary of inspiration. So inspiration comes, as I said, from the top, and this is where we get new ideas. And inspiration has always been key for innovation. And throughout history, there have been so many examples of really, really famous inspirations that people had, you know, whether it's Archimedes who runs home naked from the bathhouse after his famous Eureka moment, or Frédéric Kekulé, who had this dream about the chemical structure of benzene, which only 120 years later could actually be proven with the invention of the electron microscope. And then, of course, in the arts, it's really, really well acknowledged amongst composers and other artists, how much they rely on this kind of genius to come to them. But it's also a very much day-to-day thing in my life. The more that I've cultivated it and the more my rational mind has learned also to step aside and to let it go and to access that space that is always there. So it works in two directions. So it's not just about being receptive, but it also needs the activity of reaching out. And we do that by asking a question, by really opening ourselves, actively glancing up, saying, okay, I really, really want to know more about this. I want to get this. I want to solve this. Or also even a prayer can be that which we send up. And then the importance of being in standby mode every once in a while. And this is something that has become increasingly rare in our extremely busy lives, where we all have these smartphones that are so smart that increasingly we're not so smart anymore, it seems, because every free second is taken up by something. So we're lacking these times of just doing nothing. And these times are crucial for creative thought, for inspiration, for innovation to happen. So make sure you have these times in your life when you're unplugged, you're offline, and you're not doing anything important or particular. Good. So let's go on to the next discipline of thought, which is your intuition. And the intuition comes from below. So your inspiration comes from above, the intuition comes from below, and is also often referred to as your belly intelligence. And it usually appears in the solar plexus area. And the task of the intuition is to say yes or no, or green light, red light, or stop and go. And of course, being transrational, it doesn't say that verbally, but it just comes as a kind of sensation. For me, it often comes as a sensation of resistance or intense discomfort if it's a no, and then a kind of an ease and even a kind of a slight pull forwards if it's a yes. The intuition also comes with impulses to act. So there might be just an impulse to do something and you don't know why, but it's just a very clear impulse. And very often when we follow these impulses, when we trust them, only later do we realize why they were there and what they were good for. And also when we don't follow them and trust them, I'm sure you've all experienced this, you find yourself at a later point looking back, it's like, that was the moment, and I didn't follow that impulse. So while inspiration is very much where the future comes into us, into our consciousness, intuition is much more based on the past. It's much more based on experiential knowledge. And this is also what scientific intuition research has so far found out. So first of all, the good news for your rational mind is that according to empirical, scientific, rational research, intuition does exist. Great, good news. And what they found out is that it is one of the hallmarks of intuition that it doesn't give a reason. So it just says yes or no, and it doesn't tell you why. Now, the scientific hypothesis currently is that the reason why intuition doesn't give you a reason is that intuition is based on such complex data. It's like everything you've ever experienced or absorbed about a subject flows into the calculation of intuition. That's why I have a little computer symbol there, because it's kind of like your belly computer, and it only gives you the end result of the calculation, because your rational mind would be completely at a loss if it would have the complete data set. It couldn't process it, because the rational mind, like, it has its talents and it's very limited in its data processing capacity. Now, in many people, the intuition is blocked, and it is very often blocked through two layers that I want to briefly address. One is the emotional layer, and two is the layer of unaddressed needs or unacknowledged needs. Now, emotions is the term, like I mentioned yesterday in my keynote, that I use for unprocessed feelings from the past. So this is where you had an experience that was emotionally overwhelming. You were not able to feel what was happening. So instead of the energy of the feeling just going through your system and allowing you to relate to the situation, the energy got stuck in your system and became emotional baggage. And this emotional baggage in many people forms a kind of shield above their intuition, and it actually blocks out the natural impulses that they get, or even worse, the impulses run into the emotional shield. Together they form a huge drama, and by the time the whole thing actually reaches your consciousness, it's in such a dramatic emotional blurb that you don't even know what the original impulse was, which by nature, of course, was subtle and polite and yeah, unobtrusive. And then the second layer that often blocks the intuition, and is very much related to the emotional layer, is the layer of unaddressed needs. And this is where, for many of us, we have an issue with needs. We don't like to have needs. We don't like to be vulnerable. We don't like to address needs, and we don't know how to take care of our needs in a way that works, or to even acknowledge them if we can't fulfill them, if they can't be met. So many of us have a whole shield of unaddressed needs that we carry around with us. And of course, that's closely related to the emotional layer oftentimes. And what I recommend for people who notice that they have an issue with this, that they can't access their intuition, I recommend that they do emotional clearing work, for one. My favorite practice is the practice of conscious discharge, which I also describe in my book, The Power of Feelings. And the second thing I recommend for the layer of needs is to take time every day to tune into your belly and to ask yourself, what do I want? And then to take a notebook and to just write down every day, I want, and just make a list and let it come from your belly. And you're going to find that there's going to be really old stuff coming out. Needs that you didn't acknowledge when you were 3 years old, or your parents didn't acknowledge. So it's not about filtering or judging in any way. It's a cleansing process. And my recommendation is actually to do it daily for at least a month, and to do it with 2 notebooks. One I want and one I don't want. And that's a very powerful practice where people have told me it's been life-changing for them. And it allows also your will to evolve, and also allows you to access those deeper places of will that I was talking about before. Okay, so let's go to an experiential exploration of our intuition. And again, take a moment to close your eyes or lower your gaze. Take a moment to feel your body again. Notice how your breath is flowing in and out, all by itself. There's nothing you need to do about it. And then bring your awareness to your upper belly. If you want, you can put your hand there so that the lower end of your hand, your pinky, is just slightly above your navel. Oftentimes that helps to be more in touch with that area. And for now, just give yourself a moment to sense this part of your body. To just notice what your belly feels like right now. And you might notice discomfort, you might notice tightness. Maybe you notice ease. Whatever it is, you just acknowledge it. And then take another deep breath into your belly and see if you can relax into whatever sensation is there, even if it's tightness or discomfort. See if you can relax into it. And then allow this area to also expand. Allow your upper belly to expand, to widen. And your breath can help you with that. And as it expands, notice how it becomes easier to relax into it. If there's any uncomfortable sensations coming up, it's natural, it's okay. Just allow yourself to feel whatever is there and continue to expand this part of your body. And notice how, as this part of your body expands, there's a new space opening up. An inner space of resonance is freed up. And this resonance space is kind of like a monitor. Where you can perceive signals of yes or no, this or that, quite naturally and with ease. This is the space where you can easily present an option, ask a yes or no answer, and in this space there will be a clear yes or no without any reason. And just take a moment to acknowledge how good it is to be connected to the space within you. And then as you take one more deep breath into this space, I want to invite you to again find a physical gesture that allows you to anchor this inner space with a physical gesture. Just allow your body to find the gesture that's natural for you. And then take a moment to consciously feel the gesture as an anchor for this inner space of being connected with your belly intelligence. And then when you're ready, you can let go of the gesture and take another deep breath, bringing your awareness back to your entire body. And then when you're ready, you can lift your gaze or open your eyes. And again, we're going to go straight into quick breakout sessions for just a quick sharing about your experience with intuition. Again, focus on your experience. Okay, great. Thank you so much for your willingness to go there and to share about your experiences. So we've talked about inspiration coming from above and intuition coming from below. And I'm sure that through the experience now you noticed how different these two disciplines of transrational thought really are. And in my experience, it's very important that these two balance each other and they check each other. So sometimes there will be an inspiration, for example, for a new book. And then I will ask my intuition, you know, is it time to write this book, or is it even for me to write this book? And then oftentimes the intuition will say no, for whatever reason. And that could be because I have enough other projects that I'm working on. You know, it can be many reasons, or it's not right now. And what happens when people, for example, are very much in touch with their inspiration and don't have access to their intuition, they can often be overwhelmed with their creative ideas and they can just be overflowing, but they never manifest anything. They don't ground it. And they kind of often end up in the woods because they're not in touch with this intelligence that knows now this. Now is the moment for this. And that's what intuition is brilliant at. On the other hand, if someone is very much in touch with their intuition and doesn't have access to inspiration, they will often act very impulsively and almost instinctively, but they lack the context and the information to get, okay, why? What's the map? Why is this relevant? Where am I going? Yeah, and it can seem kind of erratic. So these two intelligences really complement each other and ideally are balanced. So maybe you just want to check for yourself, where am I with this? And where might I need to balance the two? So let's have a brief summary of intuition. So it's really about the impulse to act in each moment, yes or no. It's based on experiential knowledge. So if you find your intuition doesn't really say anything, it might be that it doesn't have enough data. If you don't have any experience in a certain arena, your intuition doesn't know what to say. So oftentimes it's also about gathering a little bit more data before you can actually say something. And sometimes that's just a sentence or two from another person, and the intuition can read so much out of that sentence that suddenly it will know yes or no. And it's also the access to transpersonal will, which I've already talked about before. Good, so let's go on to the third discipline of transrational thought that I want to talk about. And this discipline is also often not distinguished, particularly from intuition, and that is the heart intelligence. Now, as the name says, the heart intelligence is located in the heart area, so in the center of your chest. And the heart intelligence is often not distinguished from intuition because we often say, you know, follow your heart. And we don't really have a clarity culturally as to, well, what is the difference between following your heart and listening to your belly intelligence? And they're very different because they have different functions. So the heart intelligence being located in the center of your chest is the seat of transcultural ethics, so universal ethics. So the heart knows that which is beauty, that which is truth, that which is goodness. And it knows that beyond what the mind can you know, run around in circles endlessly. You know, the mind can go crazy about ethics, like, is it right or wrong? Morality, actually, more, you know. And you can, you know, really, really break your head when you're trying to make a decision. And is it right? Is it wrong? Is it correct? Can I do that? And the heart immediately knows, does this further that which is beauty, that which is truth, that which is love, that which is goodness in the world, or doesn't it? And the heart, for this reason, is also the caretaker of reason. The heart knows of meaning, meaning. And the heart knows what gives meaning to our lives and what makes sense, again, beyond the rational mind. So many people today experience themselves in a crisis of meaning, and I attribute that to the fact that we as a culture are very much disconnected from our heart intelligence. A lot of this, I feel, is attributable to our economic system, which is based on the idea of a homo economicus. And the homo economicus is, of course, a person who acts purely based on self-interest, purely for its own profit. And a homo economicus does not have a heart. It's a heartless being. And our whole economic system is based on this idea of a human being. So it means that most people, most of us, often find ourselves in a conflict as to whether we listen to our hearts or whether we follow what the economic system considers to be a good idea, to what also is rewarded in the economic system. And I witness this often in my work also with CEOs, company executives, who often, you know, are wonderful people with beautiful hearts, yet in their jobs cannot allow themselves to be in touch with their heart. One of the reasons why we're not in touch with our heart also, it's not just the homo economicus, but it's just the enormous amount of ugliness and pain that is in the world. So when we open our hearts and we look at the world with our hearts, with our heart intelligence, there is so much pain in our hearts. So many people prefer not to open their hearts, and because of that, they don't have access to the heart intelligence, and they also don't have access to what makes their life meaningful. So one of the secrets of the heart is that it not only is the organ that is able to perceive ugliness, it is also the organ that knows that a more beautiful world is possible. And these are, of course, the words of my dear friend, Charles Eisenstein. The heart knows that a more beautiful world is possible. The mind says you're completely insane. Look at the history of humanity, you know, just violence and wars. But the heart knows a more beautiful world is possible. And it is this very knowledge that causes the heart to ache. Now, the secret of the heart is that the heart also holds the medicine for the pain of the world. And this medicine, of course, is love or compassion. And what happens is that there comes a point in our journey when having a closed heart becomes so unbearable that the heart breaks open. And this is an extremely painful process. And yet when the heart breaks open, it also opens to a deeper level of love, of compassion. Very often this happens through darkness, through suffering, where people surrender, the heart breaks open, and they open to compassion and finally realize, experience that this compassion, this love in our hearts is the medicine for the pain we see in the world, for the lack of meaning we experience in our lives, for the pain we have in our hearts. And we learn to open our hearts more and more and more, allowing more and more of this medicine to be shared. And through that, we actually become part of the current of love that is currently coming into the planet and healing our relationship with life, basically. This is what the heart is all about. So let's take a moment to go into the heart intelligence, again, on an experiential level. And for this, I again want to ask you to close your eyes or lower your gaze. Take a moment to just feel your body, to become fully present. Let go of any thoughts you might still be entertaining about anything I might have said or anything else. And just feel your body. Notice your breath moving in and out. And if you would like, why don't you take a hand or both hands and place it in the center of your chest, where your heart intelligence lives. And bring your awareness to your heart space. And just take a moment to very gently feel what your heart space feels like right now. And whatever you perceive, simply acknowledge it without trying to change it in any way. And allow your breath to flow into your heart space. And take this moment to say hello to your heart. Maybe also acknowledging for a moment how good it is to have a heart. How good it is to have a heart. I sometimes like to caress my heart a little bit with my hand when I do that. And then take a moment to allow your heart space to expand. Allow it to widen. And now I want to invite you, if you're willing, to direct your awareness from your heart space, from this expanded heart space, towards someone who is close to your heart. And take a moment to see this person in front of you. And then notice how from your heart you wish for this person to be well. You wish for this person to be safe from harm. You wish for this person to be happy. And just notice how just wishing this and directing this towards this person who's close to your heart, your own heart is nourished. And then come back with your awareness to your heart space. And find a gesture also for this heart space with your physical body. Find a gesture that is natural for you. Creating an anchor for yourself for this inner space. Allow it to be natural. Trust whatever comes. And then take a moment to kind of take a mental snapshot of this gesture, this posture, and the inner heart space you're connected with. Allowing you to re-access this space with ease in the future. And then you can let go of the gesture. Bring your awareness back to your whole body. Take another deep breath, nourishing your whole body, every cell. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze. And again, we're going to go into a brief breakout session, allowing you to just quickly share about your experience of accessing the space of the heart. Okay, welcome back. So again, as people are coming back, I want to invite you to start to share a little bit about your experience in the heart space in the chat, so we can read a little bit about what people experienced in this space. Welcome back. Just invited people to start sharing in the chat about their experience.
While we're coming back, I'd also like to just let you know that we're running over a little bit in time, and we hope you can stay with us for another 10 to 15 minutes, if that's okay. So people seem to be okay.
Good. So thank you for your sharings. There was one question that came up that I want to address about the heart intelligence, and that's related to what I said about it being culturally independent. It's transcultural, actually. And I noticed this from living in so many different cultures that, of course, in every culture, there's things that are considered morally right and wrong, and they, of course, differ vastly. And yet, when people connect to their heart, suddenly there's an incredible agreement beyond words. We know what is good. So that's why I call this the seat of a universal ethics. Yeah, so the heart intelligence only offers itself when it is asked. So we actually need to ask it if we want to access it. And the heart also needs to be nourished. And this is something that we often forget. We cannot constantly expose our hearts to the ugliness of the world. We need to take time to withdraw and to nourish the heart with beauty, with love, with connection. And this can be through arts, through music, through touch, through being with beautiful people, through being in nature. All of these things nourish the heart. So if you notice your heart is not in a good state, you're not alone, and make sure you take time regularly to nourish your heart. Good. So what we have now is we've talked about the inspiration, the intuition, and the heart. And you notice that these three, actually, they form a line, a vertical line in your system. And this vertical alignment of consciousness is so different than the predominant state of consciousness in our culture. Now, the predominant state of consciousness that we're trained in also in school is where the rational mind tends to go back and forth between past and future, cause and effect, past and future, cause and effect, trying to control what's happening, trying to understand what's happening. And that's a movement that, in my perception, is very close to this. Like, it can lead to a kind of insanity that in itself can seem very rational, but actually overall it's not. So just notice, you know, as we did this journey through these three intelligences, how these three are a very different alignment of consciousness than what we're used to. And this vertical alignment of consciousness is super crucial to cultivate in these times, especially in times of crisis. And it's super important to train ourselves to shift again and again into the vertical alignment of consciousness, especially when we're under stress and we don't know what to do, because it connects us to our inspiration, our intuition, and our heart. Okay? And these three are actually very receptive qualities, very receptive disciplines of thought, where we receive information, we receive the impulse to act, and we receive the knowledge of what is meaningful, what makes sense, and what contributes to bringing the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible into being, to make it a reality. Okay, so just take a moment to acknowledge this vertical alignment and how good it feels. So next, I want to briefly talk about reason, the rational mind, because the rational mind is actually something that, as I mentioned, we've been excessively trained in, so much so that it dominates our entire mental space. For most people, it does. And what I want to do now is I want to kind of reassess what is the function of the rational mind, what is the function of reason, what is it really good at, and how can it serve the other disciplines of thought. And the movement of reason, as I said, is actually a linear movement, a horizontal movement. And it's the symbol I like to use is actually two symbols. One is the symbol of a calculator, because the intuition is like a computer. It can process vast amounts of data. And the reason, the rational mind, can process very small amounts of data, just like a calculator. And it's very bad at dealing with large numbers of unknowns. It can't handle that. So that's the calculator aspect, where it's very good to draw logical conclusions from limited data sets. But the second aspect that many people wouldn't really associate with reason is the projector. And the projector is the ability of the mind to project into the future, to imagine what could happen, what might happen, what will happen. So it can take a current development and project it into the future, and then make decisions or adjust the course of action based on that projection. So of course, that's a brilliant feature, and it's made us as a species hugely successful. However, because of the dominance of the rational mind, this faculty has really run amok in many people. So we are constantly projecting, and many people actually live in a movie theater, and they're not even aware of living in a movie theater. And they're constantly projecting fears, hopes, dreams, judgments, whatever it is, into the future, and are completely busy or absorbed by that. But, you know, if you shrink it back and you put it in context with the other disciplines, it's actually a brilliant feature of reason to be able to project this kind of thing and then make logical, rational decisions. And that's actually what the rational mind is brilliant at: logistics and time and space. It's very, very good at analyzing whether something is doable, practical, works on a time and space level. So it can take whatever insights or impulses or longings we get from the vertical disciplines and link them into time and space, into logistics, into practicality, into budgets, you know, that kind of thing. The rational mind is brilliant at. And of course, one of the very important functions is also to give words to the nonverbal, abstract impulses from the transrational disciplines. So for reason, we're not going to do an experiential journey. You've probably all had years and years and years doing that. So we're going to go directly into the fifth discipline of thought, which is intention. And the fifth discipline also works horizontally, because the fifth discipline actually reaches out into the future, and it gives us direction, and it aligns us. And intention, if intention is really, really powerful, it comes out of alignment from the vertical disciplines. So it is informed by the vertical disciplines. The vertical disciplines are then also checked by reason, and then we can formulate an intention. And the image I like to use for intention is that it's like an arrow that I can send, energetically send, and I send that arrow the moment I commit to something. The moment I decide, okay, this is what I'm going for. And the moment you do that, there's an energetic movement that is very powerful. And if that energetic movement is connected to the vertical disciplines, then it is connected to the movement of the whole, you could say, universe, of the whole of life. And this is where people experience these seemingly magical, but they're not magical, but seemingly magical incidences where suddenly doors fly open. Suddenly, just the right person at just the right moment contacts you, asks you if you need help, offers you to collaborate, etc., etc. And it's like there's a red carpet for your project or for your endeavor, okay? And this is not because you control reality. I know there's a lot of books that tell you that, and it's very popular, and of course it appeals to the ego, and you can make enormous amounts of money telling people that they can control reality and they have kind of a remote control for the world. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you don't have a remote control for the world, which is probably a good thing. But what you do have is you have the ability through your vertical time, through the vertical consciousness, through inspiration, intuition, and heart, to be receptive to the movements of the whole. You have the rational mind to see, okay, where is logistics, time, and space now? And you have intention to then send an arrow of intention to say, okay, and this is my intention. And then this intention again generates new insights through inspiration, new impulses for action through intuition, and new alignments to meaning from the heart. So it's kind of a cycle, okay? So often people, I find people, you know, realizing that it's all about becoming receptive, and they start to listen, and they say, you know, if life needs me, then I'm sure life will find me and tell me what to do. Well, you know what? If you don't send out an intention, for example, the intention to be of service, then this whole movement doesn't start. And that's kind of like going sailing without putting up a sail. You can have great winds, you can have a great boat, you can be a great sailor, but if you don't put up the sail, you're not going to go anywhere. So it's very important to start to work with intention. If you find yourself stuck or kind of like in your life, you know, you don't really know where you're going or it's not really moving, it's not just about being receptive and listening, but it's about also being active and sending an intention. And we're going to do that together right now. It's also because it's transrational, it's not a verbal thing. It's not, you know, a sentence. It's not a goal, because you send it and then you let it go, and then it has its own way. We can put words to it. For example, the intention behind my work is to contribute to the evolutionary step that is important for us right now as humanity. But that's just words. The intention is actually much more powerful, and it's nonverbal. So let's take a moment to experience this. Close your eyes again. Feel your body. Take a deep breath. And then with your eyes closed, stare straight ahead. With eyes closed, stare straight ahead. And notice how in front of you there appears a line, a horizontal line that stretches out in front of you into the future. And as you stare straight ahead and see this line, see if there's an intention that you're ready to send. Maybe it's just the intention to be of service to life, to love. Maybe it's the intention to lose a couple of pounds, to exercise. Maybe it's the intention to contribute to world peace. Just see if there's some intention that you're willing to send, and don't think about it. Just see if something comes up and see if you can feel it in your body. You don't really need words for it. And if nothing comes up, it's fine. You can just witness the process and then do it at a later time. So if you're in touch with something that you're ready to send out, take a moment to feel it in your body. Take a deep breath. And then with the out breath, allow it to release along this timeline that's outstretched before you. And just pretend you know how this works. And just observe how it happens. And then take another deep breath and notice how good it is to set the intention and then release it, let it go, and trusting that it will do what it needs to do. And know that you can always remember that you set this intention, thereby realigning yourself with it. And you can always set new intentions and more intentions as they become clear to you. So take another deep breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes and come back. So out of respect for our time constraints, I would let go of the final breakout session. And just invite you to share in the chat about your experience of this journey of intention setting. And yeah, maybe we can just hear a little bit about what people experienced. Okay, and we just had a question coming up.
So there's a lot of gratitude for you, Vivian.
Good. I'm very, very grateful to be able to share this with all of you. Very grateful.
Yeah, and it feels odd to bring this to an end because it feels like we're in the journey together, right?
Yes.
So as we're bringing this to a close, I'd like to share some ways of getting more information, learning more about Vivian's work. So I just shared it in the chat. Thank you very much, Vivian. It was an amazing, and it was amazing places that you took me, and I